At some point in life, a quiet realization begins to form. Not dramatic, not suddenly, but persistent. You start to feel slightly out of place in rooms that once felt familiar. The conversations sound the same as they did years ago. The same complaints repeat themselves. The same jokes circle endlessly. And yet something inside you has shifted. You listen, but you no longer fully belong to the rhythm of it. This realization can be unsettling. Because human beings are wired for belonging. For most of history, survival depended on remaining within the tribe. To feel psychologically separated from those around you triggers a deep and ancient fear. What if I'm becoming alone? What if something is wrong with me? But sometimes this distance does not mean you are broken. Sometimes it means you are changing, and growth, real psychological growth, often creates temporary loneliness. Not because you reject people, but because the version of you that once fit comfortably into certain dynamics no longer exists. Modern culture rarely speaks honestly about this experience. We are told that growth is supposed to look obvious and external. More achievements, better jobs, larger networks, greater recognition. Success is measured by expansion. More people, more attention, more movement. But inner development rarely works that way. In fact, it often produces the opposite effect. It simplifies, it clarifies, it removes illusions. And when illusions begin to fall away, relationships that were built on those illusions may no longer feel the same. This can create a strange emotional paradox. On the surface, your life may appear stable. Yet internally, something has shifted so profoundly that the familiar social landscape begins to feel smaller. Carl Jung described this process as part of individuation, the long psychological journey of becoming who you truly are rather than who society expects you to be. But individuation has consequences. It separates a person from collective patterns of thinking, not out of arrogance, but out of awareness. And awareness changes everything. The experience of outgrowing certain environments or relationships is rarely about superiority. It is about alignment. When your values, perceptions, and inner priorities evolve, the psychological distance between you and others can become impossible to ignore. And there are signs when this shift is happening. 4 in particular. They appear quietly, almost invisibly. Yet once you recognize them, you begin to understand why life around you suddenly feels different. Sign 1. Conversations begin to feel repetitive. One of the earliest signals that you are evolving psychologically is a subtle shift in how you experience everyday conversations. What once felt engaging begins to feel strangely predictable. You hear the same complaints repeated week after week, the same frustrations about coworkers, politics, money, neighbors. But what strikes you most is not the complaint itself. It is the lack of reflection behind it. The same patterns repeat without curiosity, without deeper questioning, and something inside you no longer wants to participate in that loop. Carl Jung once observed that until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. Many people live inside these unconscious loops. Their frustrations remain externalized. Life is always happening to them. But when someone begins developing psychological awareness, the lens changes. Instead of asking who is to blame, they begin asking, what is the situation revealing about me? This kind of thinking can make ordinary conversations feel strangely hollow. Not because the topics are trivial, but because the deeper layer, the layer of self-reflection, is missing. And gradually, you find yourself speaking less, listening more, not out of boredom, but because you are no longer energized by repeating the same surface narratives. Picture a quiet moment late at night. You sit at a kitchen table after a gathering with friends. The laughter was real, but something lingered afterward. A subtle sense that the conversations had remained on the same level they always had. No curiosity about growth, no reflection on deeper questions, just familiar patterns repeating themselves. And you realize, almost reluctantly, you are no longer nourished by these exchanges in the way you once were. Signu, you feel drawn towards solitude. Most people interpret solitude as loneliness, but psychologically, they are very different experiences. Loneliness feels like deprivation. Solitude feels like space. When someone begins growing internally, solitude often becomes necessary because reflection requires distance from constant social noise. Jung himself spent long periods alone during his most profound psychological work. He believed that confronting the deeper layers of the psyche required stepping outside collective expectations. And this is where the second sign appears. You begin choosing quiet moments over constant activity, not because you dislike people, but because your inner life has become more interesting than endless stimulation. Perhaps you take long walks alone. Perhaps evenings once filled with social media or television now become moments for reading, writing, thinking. To others, this might seem strange. They may ask why you are becoming more withdrawn. But internally, you know something else is happening. You are developing a relationship with your own mind. And once that relationship deepens, superficial interactions become less compelling. Imagine a simple scene: a quiet street just before sunrise. You walk slowly while the rest of the city still sleeps. No notifications, no conversations, just the rhythm of your own thoughts. In these silent moments, insights begin to surface. Memories rearrange themselves. Questions emerge that were previously drowned out by noise. This solitude is not emptiness, it is integration. Sign 3. You become less interested in approval. For much of life, social approval acts as an invisible compass. People adjust their behavior to maintain acceptance within their environment. They say what is expected. They avoid conflict. They shape themselves around the expectations of their group. But as psychological maturity develops, something subtle begins to change. Approval loses its emotional power. This does not mean you stop caring about people. It means you stop organizing your identity around their reactions. Viktor Frankl described this shift in his exploration of meaning. When a person becomes oriented toward deeper values, truth, purpose, authenticity, the need for external validation weakens. And this can create distance, because many social groups unconsciously rely on mutual reinforcement. People maintain unspoken agreements about how things should be interpreted, what should be praised, what should be ignored. But when someone begins thinking independently, they gently step outside these agreements. Not aggressively, simply naturally. And others feel this shift immediately. Some will respect it. Others will become uncomfortable, because independent thinking quietly challenges the group's emotional equilibrium. Consider a moment at work. A discussion unfolds where everyone agrees with the dominant opinion. In the past, you might have followed the same pattern, but now something different happens. You pause, reflect, and calmly offer a perspective that does not entirely match the group. Not confrontational, just honest. The room grows slightly quieter, not hostile, just aware. In that moment, you realize something important. You are no longer adjusting your identity to maintain harmony. You are allowing truth to guide you instead. And this shift inevitably changes relationships. Item 4, why deepest sign man by the humor. You begin seeing life through a longer lens. Perhaps the deepest sign of psychological growth is the expansion of perspective. You begin thinking less about immediate gratification and more about the long arc of life. Friedrich Nietzsche once suggested that maturity means developing the capacity to live beyond momentary impulses, to consider not just what feels good now, but what creates meaning across decades. When someone begins to see life through this wider lens, priorities change. Petty conflicts lose their emotional grip. Short-term status games feel uninteresting. Instead, attention turns toward deeper questions. What kind of person am I becoming? What will remain when the noise of daily life fades? And this shift can create a quiet, emotional distance from those still deeply invested in immediate dramas. Again, not because they are wrong, but because your psychological horizon has expanded. You are looking further ahead. There is a scene that captures this transition well. Imagine visiting an aging relative in a hospital room. The machines hum softly. Time feels slower. Conversations drift toward memories, regrets, unfinished dreams. Moments like these have a strange effect. They compress the illusion of endless time. Suddenly life appears fragile, finite, and once a person truly absorbs this reality, many ordinary concerns begin to feel less urgent. From that moment forward, you see life differently, and when you return to everyday conversations filled with trivial conflicts, the contrast becomes impossible to ignore. But here is the difficult truth. Outgrowing certain environments does not mean rejecting people. It means accepting that paths diverge. Every individual moves through life at their own psychological rhythm. Some remain within familiar patterns for decades. Others feel compelled to explore deeper questions earlier. Neither path is morally superior. They are simply different. But the moment you begin evolving inwardly, you may experience an unfamiliar feeling. A mixture of gratitude and distance. You still care for the people around you, yet the version of yourself that once shared their worldview has quietly transformed. Near the end of life, many people reflect not on how popular they were or how many rooms they fit into. They reflect on whether they became authentic, whether they had the courage to follow the deeper movement of their own psyche. Jung believed that the tragedy of many lives is not failure. It is unlived potential, the refusal to grow beyond the expectations of one's environment. And this is why the discomfort of outgrowing certain circles is not necessarily a loss. It may be evidence that individuation is unfolding, that the deeper self, the one hidden beneath social conditioning, is beginning to take shape. Imagine one final quiet image. A house late at night, most lights turned off. You sit alone with a book or journal, reflecting on the day. Outside, the world continues its endless rush of conversations, opinions, and noise. But inside this quiet moment, something different is happening. You are becoming more conscious, more deliberate, more aligned with the person you are slowly discovering within yourself. And while this journey may create moments of solitude, it also creates something far more valuable: clarity. Because the goal of life was never to fit perfectly into every room. It was to grow into the one person you were meant to become. If this reflection resonated with you, share it with someone who might also be navigating this quiet transformation. And subscribe for more explorations into psychology, meaning, and the deeper patterns shaping the human journey.